And we are on. And right now, it's just the two of us.
All right. We can make it if we try.
Just the two of us. However, we will have, and there we are, we have people on our live stream. And so I just want to say welcome, welcome, welcome to tonight's episode of Tuesday Talk. We have the legendary Dr. Leonard Jeffries. And I had to say his first name because there is also a counterpart, legendary Dr. Jeffries, his wife, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries. She won't be a guest this evening, but there are two amazing Dr. Jeffries in our midst. Can you believe that?
She's at the other end of the house on her computer dealing with the world in terms of the struggle over um, an organization, a Black arts organization. So
Mhm.
she's leading the struggle in getting maintaining the integrity of that. And then she's also preparing for her classes tomorrow. She's still teaching 50 something years, and she's still putting the word out there for the world. You know, so
Yes, the Jeffries uh, are an amazing, dynamic couple. I had the pleasure of meeting them in person. I think a couple of weeks ago at this point in Philadelphia at the museum at the Penn Museum tour. So I just want to introduce to those of you who may not know who Dr. Jeffries is. It's hard to be succinct in describing what Dr. Jeffries has done for our community. He was born and raised in Newark, New Jersey, had a great Pan African foundation that was given to him, like the soil of his life from which he's rooted up, and has fought for the Pan African movement most of his life. He has traveled to the motherland, to the continent, and to Central and Latin America around 100 times. That's an amazing amount of time to spend with our Pan African brothers and sisters. And if you name someone who has been in this fight for Black liberation, Dr. Jeffries has had something to do with that. Someone who he knew, worked with, worked for him. He is an amazing legend, a true legend that is in our midst. So really, this is a real treasure to have Dr. Jeffries with us. So I just want to say welcome, Dr. Jeffries. I'm glad that we had you back on our show.
well, certainly I'm glad to be in your hands because I know they are loving and caring hands. And so, I mean, I couldn't do what I have done over the years if it wasn't for the African woman, the African woman mother, the African woman grandmother, the African woman auntie, the African woman who becomes my third uh, mother. In other words, this is my mother's oldest sister's daughter, and she was a mother figure. And she had 9 kids of her own, but growing up, she took care of my brother and I. So to have the multiple mothers in your life, your biological mothers, your African neighborhood mothers, your cousins and whatnot. This is Dorothy Clark, who had 9 kids,
Mhm.
but she specialized in learning how to raise kids by raising us, uh, because her mother was our second mother. And so, I mean, the story of how we have developed is an extraordinary one. So I'm glad that you have a chance to even allow me to focus in on some of our uh, the reason why we are. We're not here because white folks opened the door for us
I
to
know
make
that's
our
right.
way. We're not here because they nurtured us, people who were in opposition to us. We fought a great fight, and we still are fighting it. And if you do not plant that fight in your children and in your family, you're going to be in trouble. And so that's why I'm so glad that I went into, instead of going into law, I was supposed to be the lawyer. The Thurgood Marshall was my uh, idol, but once I went to Europe and I saw the world and I saw African people from everywhere, then I said, wait a minute, that's where you should go into Africana studies and not let somebody else handle the law. So I went to law school for a year. It was a great year, but I had already been smitten by the bug, and I knew I had to become spread that Africanness all around the world, even to white folks. I got white folks to love Africa because they have seen me and have related to me, and they know that I don't use it as a barrier to keep people away. I use it as a ramrod to knock down the doors of white supremacy and the stupidness of our own ignorance. And you need as strong a weapon as you can get. So I got the biggest ramrod that is possible, and that is the truth.
The truth.
Capital T. The truth is the ramrod. You step into African knowledge with that ramrod, everything else is devastated. And that's why if you go on the internet, put my name in there, they have me as the worst person in the world. He's nasty. He hates everybody. He lies. He don't have any degrees. And so I just laugh. And I said, let them play with themselves. They call that masturbation. And you ain't going nowhere with masturbation. You got to get into the true development of the human spirit.
Thank you for that, Dr. Jeffries. That's definitely one way of putting it. And I think we all understand that you ain't going nowhere with just by yourself.
By faking it. You got to get into the real deal and work with people, and even find those white folks who appreciate and want to work with you, and build the bridges to them also. So Skip Gates, Henry Louis Skip the Truth Gates up there at Harvard, he's not the only one that reaches out to white folks. I grew up with him, and we lived in I called it the African village, but the African village had, even though we were the predominant families there, they had the Italians, they had the Irish, they had the Jews. In fact, when I grew up in grammar school, I had what I called the 4 or 5 musketeers. Myself and my brother, representing black folk. Down the street was Anthony Serrato. His father was a plumber, and Anthony went to the high school. He really appreciated the grammar school. He really appreciated us. And in fact, when we graduated from high school, he wrote on the yearbook that I have right up, that I designed. Well, I don't need to do it. Just reach on up and grab the yearbook. And this is the yearbook that I designed the cover of, called Athena, 1955. And 1955, I graduated. I was the president of the class of these Italians, Jews, and Irish. Anthony Serrato, when we graduated from the high school, this is the graduation from high school. He wrote on his picture, on my picture, on his book, the first black president. And he wasn't talking about the president of the class or the president of a school. He was talking about, you have the potential of being a black president of these United States. This is a young Italian friend who lived in our neighborhood, in our village. And so, and I hate to open this up because you'll see how I looked back in the day. Now, if at 85, I still got me a little bit of something, oh, you wouldn't want to see. Look, the little white girls used to sit there and just put their hands under their chin and just admire us blacks. And I said, look, we're normal like everybody else. But of course, I played baseball. I have me in here playing my tenor sax. I played saxophone. I was one of the key persons to pull this thing together. So look, this is a young kid. And if I can do it as a youngster, you can imagine what I've been able to do since I got my smarts together, traveled the world,
right,
attached myself to people like Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben, and these key women like Regent Adelaide Sanford, one of the greatest educators in the world, Betty Shabazz, Malcolm's widow, good friend of mine, sister, power sister, raising her 5 babies by herself after her husband was murdered. And Betty was just an extraordinary individual. So that's why we need to get into our history to understand our families, how they developed a survival network for us. And then we need to pass it on. Oh, well, we can't do anything, Dr. Jeffries. Our hands are tied. No, they're not. Your mind is tied.
Your mind is tied.
And once you break that mind, you are ready to move on.
That's right.
And then you got to pass it on in generations. So this is the angels in our family. These three little angels, three little girls. These are my youngest nephew's children, Dr. Hassan Jeffries. And then on the back side, there is a picture of his beautiful wife, who is a medical doctor. There he is with his suspenders. He's a political science doctor. And there he got the three little angels. And they had nerve enough to call me last week. I almost wet my pants. I couldn't believe it. They just called me to say hello to Uncle Lenny. And we did last year. We went out to Ohio to meet them. And oh, my goodness. So I'm saying it's about family. White folks can't take this from us with the lies about who is what and who has done what. We need to recapture it and make it real.
You know? Absolutely. So Dr. Jeffries, so I wanted to get into the topic for tonight.
Yes.
And having you speak on it is something that, we're getting this from an absolute master teacher. And the word master just isn't enough, really, quite frankly. But let's discuss the pyramid analysis, political. So before we get into the discussion, what is pyramid analysis, politics, economics, and culture? What are the pyramid analysis, politics, economics, and culture? What is that, and how does that?
You almost had it right. But you missed a beat. And that's an important beat, because we just watched a 3-hour program. What was the program, Josh? The sister from who had the program just today.
Who are you talking about?
The African sister who had
Zainab Badawi
and Badawi.
BBC History of Africa.
No, this is the one that has her show, just like our sister. She could be our sister.
Oh, Susan Tata.
Yeah. And she had
African Daily TV.
African Daily TV, and she is wonderful. She does a great job, but she was facing an African brother from Ghana who felt that Nkrumah was the most important thing in the world, and that Mao Zedong and Nkrumah. I mean, but she tolerated. She let him run his thing, and he did it. Unfortunately, in terms of he had been thoroughly brainwashed in terms of thinking that the key for Africa was the Chinese, was Mao Zedong, and what the Chinese have. The Chinese have their own history, and we can. Yes, that's what I said. What? And they went on for hours. In other words, and this fellow was a very strong African, but he was missing the analysis. He had all the information about the Chinese, but not enough of the information about what Africans have done. Right. And we can't have the Chinese as a model. You can understand their history because you got to work with them. We can't have white folks as a model.
That's right.
We have to have our African models.
That's right.
And so that's what we will be fighting for as we go to glory. We're going to still be fighting for African models. The Chinese have a model that comes out of their experience. White folks have a model that comes out of their experience. Native Americans, the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere, they have a model that comes out of their experience. But the most important model in the human family is the model that comes out of Africa, that comes out of the great river valleys of Africa, the Nile River Valley, along with the Niger River Valley, along with the in Zimbabwe, the great river systems in South Africa. So when I teach and I use my reference points, I talk about the 6 river systems of Africa that help to produce human culture and civilization. So I came up with what I call my pyramid analysis, using the pyramidal shape to process information. And this young fellow, he was processing it with politics as the first principle, and then economics as the complementary principle, and then culture as the key. Now, he almost had it, but I don't start off politics as the first principle of human development. I start off with economics. Economics is the first principle, because if you don't have economics in your world, you ain't going nowhere. Economics is how you produce as a human family, how you produce in order to eat, in order to survive. So economics is the first principle of the universe. And so when we master economics, we've got a foundation to build on. At the other polarity, where you have your productive, creative systems put in place, you have to manage them. They have to be managed correctly. And so the economics is the first principle, and then you complement it with management, and management is the political, it's the organizational. And so if your economics and politics is not properly organized, you're not going to be able to sustain it, to maintain it, and you're not going to be able to pass it on. So the foundation of the human family system capability, I'm approaching this thing in what I'm calling system capability. In order to do something, you have to understand systems. And so economics is that first principle. The complementary principle to make economics work for you is politics, and that's management. You got to have management capabilities to manage the flow of the rivers, to manage how you develop irrigation systems, to manage how you build dams in order to hold the rivers back from the power of flooding and whatnot. So economics, politics are the foundation for anything that we do. Even if we're talking about the cell of the body, just going internally, economics, your cell has to have that flow of economics, politics, and culture. That it can't be out of whack. The economy has to be properly managed. And then you got to have balance in the politics. But you do the economics and the politics for the righteousness of the ideas, the belief system, and that's culture. So the tool that I hope people can take from my contribution is that what I call pyramid analysis, where you see the flow and the flux of things, where you see the interaction, and where you see the growth and development. And so my course outlines were designed that way. And I'm still seeing the impact of it. Yesterday I had to get a taxi driver to rush to my lawyer, and we got there a little late, but so I asked him how much was the fare, and he said, "Dr. Jeffries, you were my teacher. I can't take a fare from you." This fellow I didn't know from Adam, but he was serious. He said, "It's an insult for you to even think that I would charge you. Now, when you finish with the lawyer, do you want me to come back?" So I told him, no, I was going to walk through the community to come back, which I did. And so it's wonderful when you can go, like one of our brothers, Sabu, he passed, he made his transition a month or so ago, and they had a fabulous celebration of his funeral. He was with Shekem's people, and so he had been deep into the African tradition. He was a pain to Charles and I, because he calls all the time and says, "Look at this program, check this out, do this." I said, "Goodness," he was into everything. He was like our news coordinator and whatnot. So, but he was a drummer, and he had this drumming group that was just fantastic. These brothers were extraordinary. And so he was bringing the wisdom to us and the knowledge, and making sure that we stayed on the African course. But when his family came out, his biological family, his social, his cultural family, his political family, his economic family, I mean, you saw that he was the product, and he was sustained by this this collectivity of Africanness. And we went to the burial part of the ceremony. And again, they still maintain no tears, but joy, drumming that joy into the atmosphere. And when I went past the young fellows to congratulate them for what they had done when we were going to our car, and Charles had it ready, the fellows, I said, thank you for what you've done today to celebrate this great brother's life. And collectively, they said, Dr. J, you're our foundation. And what could I say? I couldn't say nothing. And the one guy, the tallest guy, the strongest guy, he said, Dr. J, we all had your classes. And I was an A+ student. And that was the thing that separated the students out from the other. A+ student means that brother had it. He got it. He says, I just didn't get a B. No, I wasn't satisfied with that. I wasn't satisfied with an A, because a B was for Black and A was for African. He went to the A+. We come to
What's C for? Is C for coon?
No, for colored.
Colored.
C for colored. But see, the African tradition, you can have the negatives and the positives. So that grading was the positive. You come in, everybody comes into my classes equal.
Right.
And even white folks, they come in with a C for colored, because all of us are colored. Some are colored white, some are colored yellow, some are colored brown, etc. So we all come in equal. However, you'll be exposed to information that will allow you to grow and go. And so you can move up to that B for Black. And if you really get into the movement of things, you can move on up to that A for African.
I like this, Dr. Jeffries.
Well, but it is the real deal. However, the law of opposites are such that there is a rise, but you can also go the other way, the law of negativity. And so you can slide from that C and go down to a D. And that's moving in the right direction. And that D is, you don't want to go there, because that's a D for darky, for dummy, and for Dominican.
What? Okay.
What happened to your smile? Now your brows are... a D for Dominican. Oh my goodness. And a good part of the class was Dominican.
Okay.
And they're sitting there stunned. They're looking at each other. He didn't go there. And I heard him. I said, yes, I did go there. And I'm going there hard and heavy. And that's where you're going to deal with. See, the Dominicans are a perfect example of dealing with the question of Africanness and color. They done built a culture that's insane with it. Yes. They took that island of Hispaniola and put a dividing line across it. And if you're on one side of the dividing line and you're Haitian, you are Black. And if you're on the other side of the dividing line and you are Dominican, you are white. I mean, that's the ultimate incentive. These are people coming from the African origin, and they've created this barrier. So I just moved it simply because I know what's going to happen. So I told them, I said, now, for you to get into this knowledge, you got to come up with 10 essays. And the first essays, and they require organization. You have an introduction to your essay, then you have a body of knowledge, then you have a conclusion. And you don't wait to the last minute to do it. They will be done over the class. Now, the people are still stunned because they're still saying, D for Dominican, for darky and whatnot. I said, oh. And so I said, well, I want you to start this research right away when you go home. And you ask your parents about your background and your family. And when you ask them about their Africanness, if you come from one of these crazy families that can't see Africanness, you better be prepared to duck and use your defensive mechanisms if you know any martial arts. Now,
Dr. J, I'm so sorry to interrupt. We can hear you, but your screen is frozen. I don't know. There we go. Okay, you moved. Okay. I don't know if that did it. Okay.
I think Charles was holding up with his spirit, and then he just released his negativity. So Charles was saying, "You, Doctor, you ain't supposed to go." Look, the best thing I did was to have this mix of peoples in the classes. Dominicans are an important part of the Black community, and they're Black. My mother used to love to go to the Dominican Republic for her vacations and take her aunt, etc. But she's the one that told me about the color question in the Dominican Republic. And she was light, so she could manage. But if she had taken me to the Dominican Republic as dark as I am, they would have probably said, well, the mother, you go over here, and the son, you go over here. That's how serious this
it's serious.
Go ahead.
I'm friends with this Dominican couple. They are Pan-African Dominicans who understand this firsthand.
Yes.
And she explained to me just the colorism that undergirds the culture and how Haitians are treated. And I have a play little sister who's Haitian, and I've heard her kind of echo the same sentiment that my Dominican friend, echoed. And I lived in Washington Heights for a few months. And I personally didn't have any problems in the Heights. I don't consider myself light or dark. I'm caramel colored.
Right.
And they thought I was Dominican because they spoke to me in Spanish all the time. Yeah. So it's interesting that you bring that up. And I worked in one of the jobs I had in New York, about 10 something years ago. There was a girl who worked there, and her grandmother's name was Africa. So that means that her great grandmother named her Africa. Yes. And so it was interesting to see some Dominicans who did have a sense of their Africanness, but I have definitely seen Latin American brown-skinned people who look like me, features, yes, color. My hair is curly, if it's out, not here. And he called himself Irish. And I said, Irish and what? Because I was substitute teaching at a school. We were in the cafeteria. I said, Irish and what? He said, Irish. I said, and what? Yes. Because I'm from Connecticut and I went to prep school. I know what Irish looks like. And it wasn't him.
Right. Yes.
So I basically was making him say, Dr. Jeffries, I made him acknowledge the melanated part of him, because when you walking down the street, when the cops see you, what they seeing? And that's what I said to him. Right. I said, do they see a little Irish boy or do they see a Black boy? Yes. Do they see me and you, or do they see? And Dr. Jeffries, I wasn't letting him eat nothing. Nathan, you're gonna answer this question. And it was like I had to. If he were my kin folk, I would have just shook him. Right. I didn't put my hands on him, but he admitted it, and he had to say it. How do you look yourself in the face and deny what you see coming looking at you? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But that's really what we're facing. Not knowing our culture, which is a part of, what you were saying with the pyramid analysis, with the, not recognizing our history and therefore not understanding like what they are seeing when they're out in this world.
Yes. So, of course, I've traveled the world, and that meant I've been to all of these nations, and that color question is there.
It's there everywhere.
It's in the Caribbean. It's in Jamaica. It's in Trinidad. It's in
everywhere.
Puerto Rico. And the Virgin Islands. So we've got to deal with it. And that's why I said I might as well face it right off in my classes. And the students are really appreciative. I had a chance to go to Haiti several times. I was training Haitian young men in a machine shop. I was teaching them culture and English. They were learning machine shop. And they made it clear that Haiti is infected with this. Even though they should know better, but they also have the color question is very real in their. It's global. In other words, it's global. We need to deal with it. It is global, and so by us finding this truth that we are foundation of the human family. There is humanity, and it is us. Everybody else springs from the African root. And
That's
so
right.
we might as well get used to it. And so Dr. John Henry Clark took us to Puerto Rico. This is our great mentor. And we sat at his feet over the years, and he really taught us. So we went up into the mountains, Barranquitas, and we got there. It was late, and we got there at night. And so I was glad to finally get to the top of the mountain, and we had this nice session on history of peoples. But when we left there after a day or so, and I saw the mountain road that we had to take, I said, "Oh my God, I would have had to wet my pants because we were up really in the mountains." I would have said, "We ain't gonna make it." But Dr. Clark was there to cement us to the Spanish relationship to Black people. And then
That's
when
right.
we went down to our next thing was to Washington, D.C., and we had to deal with the color question in our own capital. If
Right.
you were light and bright, you could make it in Washington. If you were dark and melanized, you were in trouble, brothers and sisters. And so we had a session on that. And then he picked us up and he said, the next stop we're going is to Jamaica. And so we were glad, Jamaica, Jamaica. We were all, happy about the Jamaican contribution to things. Well, when we got to Jamaica and we were having our session, the Jamaican students said, "We need you Black students to come down there and help us." I said, "What do you mean come down to help you?" They said, "We need to, you see the top of that mountain? That's Mona Heights. And at the top of that mountain is the University of the West Indies. At the top of that mountain is communities called Bel Air and Hollywood and whatnot. And those are the light-skinned Black people posturing and not giving respect for us with the heavy melanin. So they wanted us to come down and help lead them fight their own people." And then we said, okay, and luckily we helped out. We brought Marcus Garvey's books to Jamaica. How can you, the one of the greatest Black person in the history of the world, and who stands and proudly as a Jamaican, how could you not have his book there? But Dr. Clark knew, and we brought books to Jamaica. And then when we got on the plane to go to Trinidad, we didn't just go there for the carnivals and all of the great things that happened in Trinidad. We had to take the Prime Minister's books. Now, the Prime Minister was a great scholar, and but he banned his own books in Trinidad Tobago. Can you imagine a great scholar feeling that his education when he was in England and when he was in America, he even taught at Howard University, and Eric Williams, brilliant scholar, and but banned his own book. How can you go to that extreme? Simply because you didn't want this consciousness to spread to these young people who were not within your control,
Dr. Jeffries, I have a question. This is a bit confusing to me.
Yes.
How can someone, and I understand that white fragility masquerading as white supremacy, that it has infected everybody on this planet, can be a bit crazy and confusing. But how can one be enlightened enough to know, to write a book about enlightenment, but then ban it? It's like, here's the good stuff, but you can't have it.
Yes, so that's why we raised the question with the Dominicans, but we want to let people know it's everybody.
It's everybody on the planet. We can't see
it. Crazy white people. The English say that we're white, but the people across that river, across that lake, that ocean, meaning not the English Sea, the Irish. The Irish are not worthy to be white. In other words, if you have that sickness that's pervading everybody, we think that, the poor Jews were oppressed. No, there's a history of the devastation of peoples of difference. That's the history. That's why we need to put that whole Maatian principle of balance and harmony in the universe that the Africans gave to the world. So it's not a measure of skin color or whether you have blue eyes or whatnot. And so we have to get rid of that poison. And so, but you need to do it with a smile. You're getting serious now. Where's that smile? Hey, there it is. It ain't going nowhere. Hey, yes. When we do this with joy and happiness. And when one of my Dominican students went to his, because I told him, I said, tell your folks at a quiet moment, maybe when you're having dinner or something, but be prepared for some defensive karate postures because
Right.
it may get a little hot. So he raised it. His family started to deal with it. But the person who was the hottest and the most worked up was his grandma. Little old sweet grandma went crazy. And he had to take protective measures against grandma, looking for something to throw at him, etc.
Was she gonna stab him? Was she gonna stab him, Dr. J?
She's gonna slap some whiteness into him. If he don't understand what it is, she's gonna beat it into him. So that's what we have to deal with. We have to beat the whiteness out, but with knowledge, with the truth. Yes, we got to beat the whiteness out of all of us. You know, that's the biggest problem with me and my friend Henry Louis Skip the Truth Gates. He was raised with some whiteness in his family, and it was a denial of the Africanness. And now he's one of the great scholars, etc. But him and I, before we leave the planet, we had to have a long talk. Okay. And you know, because he found he has a little bit of whiteness, and so
we all do.
He's right, and we all do. And then with my situation, it's the Native Americans. And my mother said that her grandmother was Native American, and her name was Pocahontas. I said, "Ma, really?" I said, "Let's not go too far now." And cause I'm looking as dark as I am, and my mother is light, so she's a part of that mixture. But Pocahontas was part of the original Native peoples who welcomed the Europeans to so-called America.
Right.
And then the result was the Indians got a welcoming process, and they welcomed anybody, and they welcomed the white folks. But eventually, those Indians on the coast, the Atlantic coast, going through the heartland of America, going out into the Midwest, going all the way across this land, they were messed with by white supremacy that took everything they had.
Everything.
And it's genocide. You're talking about genocide of the Jewish peoples in Nazi Germany. We need to talk about the reality of genocide in these Americas still going on today. The rich oil lands of Oklahoma and whatnot, those were Native American lands.
Yes.
But the people went to such an extent to block their humanity that they killed 1 million buffalo to kill their food supply. And they were famed for having put smallpox in the blankets that they sold to the Native Americans. Now, these are the white folks we've had to live with and survive with, and we've done it. We've been able to neutralize them as best we can. And then people said, "Oh, Obama." Look, thank God for Obama, because if look who we got now, Trump. and we had to put tell the devil to back off. That's too much to deal with. I mean, and Trump is so unusual that he got a sister who wrote a book that he's a dog, that he stole my money from the family. He's got a young lady, a woman, a niece. She's written a book about who the hell do you know has 2 members of your family writing about you being the worst of the dogs of the dogs of the dogs. Oh, my goodness gracious.
Well, I think the only other person that might have a book written about him that bad would be Christopher Columbus. But yes. Let me ask you this question, Dr. Jeffries. You touched on a lot of different elements with the stealing of the land, with the oil. That's in reference to economics. Smallpox.
Right.
With killing the buffalo. That's in reference to genocide. And we live in a day and age where we have colonization happening, which people call gentrification, which still has an economic component to it. How can we use the first, part of your pyramid analysis with economics? What is a tangible activity that we can do, or what is tangible that we can do to use our economics to help with our Black liberation?
Well, that's what I call, what we need is, don't tell nobody, because it might get you and me in trouble. We need integration.
How,
Integration is the key.
how did that work for us before, Dr. Jeffries?
Uh,
How,
we were the first people to planet uh, Earth. In other words, to plant ourselves on Earth. And
mhm.
so the various branches of the human family uh, connected. And that was us in different climatic modes, us in different environments. So the different color combinations emerged. And then we have been able to integrate the mix of human variations to create a human race. The human race is us. And the key was integration, not separation, not humiliation, not devastation. And so we need to integrate. I don't want to integrate. I don't want to sit down in no bus next to no white folks. Don't worry about sitting down next to them. What you need to do, if you really are smart, is buy the bus, buy the whole bus system. That's what we should have done instead of us walking uh, with that system down in Montgomery. We should have said, "Y'all don't want us on the bus. Well, we ain't. We're gonna boycott and boycott. We're gonna uh, be able to do what we need to do. And then we ain't going to stop there. We're going to put our monies in a separate pot. And after boycotting the bus, that separate pot of money is going to allow us to buy you out. And so it ain't a question of integration, it's a question of organization, organizing ourselves for power, organize ourselves to have an economic flow that goes into a political integration of power, and that's dealing with the culture. Culture ain't shaking your booty unless you're doing it for the spiritual development. Culture is the key. Culture are the deep values that relate you to the universe. And culture ain't coming from no one man or one woman. Culture is coming from the fact that you are human within this enormous space of human development. So that's why we need to get serious. I don't want to come at you so heavy and hard, meaning you, anybody. That's why I have to make it light.
We
You
need
know,
it. Dr. Jeffries, we need it. Just we'll be fine. Just give it to us how you want to give it to us.
okay,
Everybody be okay.
a heavy dose, and but then if you go into a coma, we got to have an antidote. And so the antidote
I'm
is
anecdote.
a mixture of some coconut, this with some African peppers, with some other things. We're gonna come up with an antidote. If it's too much for you and you done fell out trying to get white, we're gonna work with you and bring you back step by step.
So
Africanness is the key. Integration, yes, but integrating with our own people and then integrating with others who wish to have that African connection. And there
so
is,
can I just jump in and say this?
it's
So
your show. You can do anything. You could push a button and I'll be gone. I'm having a good time. But you look, go ahead.
this is really people showing up for you, Dr. J. So just so we're clear, let's make sure we understand integrating with our own people. That's what Dr. Jeffries said. He gave the example that we needed to own our own bus company, which is us as Pan-African people, Pan-African Black people, coming together with our own money so that we can control what it is that we do. We had this when we were the very first people on the planet. So let me just take a couple steps back in case some people don't know that. African people were the first people on the planet. We
Yes,
can
praise the
see
Lord.
that's right. We can see the accomplishments that we did as Pan-African Black people when it was just us and the divine.
Yes,
Okay. So we populated the planet by migrating around the planet, which is something that Dr. J touched on. And during the times when we were separated and we were in our own communities, we had our economics, politics, and culture. We had
yes,
that. We owned everything there within our community. We have, Black Wall Street, what happened in Tulsa. There are other functioning Black communities. We don't have to think about the famous, wealthy, rich Black communities. We can look at any Black community that we had, especially in the South. I'm Black American on both sides. My father's family goes to Georgia. My mom's family goes to Virginia and then North
Hey,
Carolina.
no, it ain't. You're copying. You just copied that. You pull that out of the air. That's my story. My father's family is Georgia. My mother's family is Virginia. So
Really?
yeah, don't be jumping up and down.
We
Next thing I know, you
related.
say we were cousins.
I'm related to Dr. J. Okay. We're going to talk about this after the show. But the point is the economic like the collective work of us as African people is something that we need to do again. Not for the first time, again.
Yes.
These are not new. We ain't new to nothing because we were here first. We are not new to a collective economic foundation and prowess for our people. We are not new to this, so we need to do it again. So when you hear that we need to do it, I want you to hear again in your head, because when you hear we have to do this again, it means that we did it before, and therefore we know how to do it. So no, we don't need to do it. We need to do it again.
Yes.
So say that in your head. We need to do this again. We need to do this again.
We need to reclaim our fame. And the white folks knew that when they came to America, they couldn't handle the hard work that was necessary to clear the land. They needed us. And that was the initial understanding. They tried the Native Americans. Native Americans they went to their little smoke rituals and whatnot. And the Native Americans realized that this was an evil force that had come among them. So the Native Americans started moving away and moving further and further away. But we had to come as part of the integrated package, because there would not have been any enslavement if we had not been in the mix, because nobody else could survive the devastation of losing your everything. Survived it. We survived it, and we prevailed. And that was the initial meeting of the European and the Native American and the African. But what happened was, as manufacturing became a part of, and the sugar cane, you go through the tobacco, the sugar cane cycle, etc., then the Europeans needed more greedy from this labor. And so they came up with cotton. And in order for cotton to be properly handled, you had to have black hands going and pulling that cotton out of it. You had to have black hands, black baby hands, black youngster hands, black auntie hands, black grandma hands, black men. In other words, the whole family of Africans was put in the soil to pull that cotton out of those plants, dragging those bags. We don't have a clue of the real history. The whole family sitting on the porch after they then pulled up this load and then made white folks rich. They as a family sat together to eat together, to talk together. I mean, the story of what we have done is unbelievable. But then when they had the failure of this and the failure of that, then when they went into, they needed this, tobacco didn't work and whatnot, they planted 1 million acres of land with these pine trees. And so they could get wealth from the pine trees. And eventually they had to uproot the pine trees and put in the newest crop. The cotton gin had come around. We need to see the history for its fullness. And we're playing with it, worried about this and worried about that. No, you need to see us as the key and us surviving. I mean, my grandfather was murdered by the Klan in 1917, August the 10th. But the tallest tombstone in the graveyard is his tombstone. And it is standing there. When I went for the first time, we had a family reunion down in Georgia. Well, I actually saw it before that. I was with the Alex Haley filming of Roots in Brunswick, Georgia, and Savannah, Georgia, and the set that they had set up. And then I got tired of them having history miscalculated. And so Alex Haley would always come to them and say, no, let's talk to the expert. I brought Dr. Jeffries down here to give us some expertise. And so I changed a lot of things. White folks got tired of me. especially when there was a scene of a cutaway of a slave ship, and it appeared so real. Lou Gossage and myself and others were on the side watching this scene, a cutaway of a slave ship, and O.J. Simpson, uh, well, he did act simple. Leaping over cars and making a whole lot of money and then fooling with the white woman and get OJ was the head of the youth. He was the manager of the youth, and so he had an upper deck. But I said to them, I couldn't change OJ because it was already in the can. But I said, there's no way a Muslim youth trainer would have beads around his head, beads hanging from his ears, beads around his neck. He would have a simple tunic of plain white cloth and maybe a key symbol of the Quran or something. But Roots, I had to make some key changes. That one I couldn't make because it was already in the can. But here's this scene where O.J. Simpleton is in the upper fourth deck, and he's calling down to the lower deck because that's where Kunta Kinte is. And Kunta Kinte is moaning and groaning. O.J. Simple calls down and said, Kunta Kinte, you have to eat. We have to be strong because we may have to fight the white man to return to Mother Africa. Now, that was such a highlight. All of us grown men are in tears with this thing. And the white boy came out, the producer Green from England, handling the African part of it. He said, cut. And when what was said that we may have to fight, kill the white man and return to Mother, he said, cut that out. We don't need that in there. Now, once that was done, my African manhood stood up and I said, I got to get out of here. I said, this ain't right. And the white folks knew it. So they sat me down for lunch. All of these big, wealthy white folks go make all these tens of millions of dollars on Roots, sat me down. They said, Dr. Jeffries, we're glad you're here. But we want you to know that we bought the rights to Roots. We're under no obligation to deal with the history of the book Roots. And we certainly don't have to deal with the truth of African history. Now, once I was deballed in that way by white folks, I needed some recovery. And the recovery came in form of my ancestors that said, you have to leave this space and go to your grandfather's grave. So me and the creator having this discussion, I said, grandfather's grave? I don't know nothing about no grandfather down here in Georgia. And so the word was, find your grandfather. And so I finally called up to New Jersey, called to Aunt Bessie. Aunt Bessie, tell me something about our family. Where is your father from? And she said, we're from Ohio. I said, Aunt Bessie, we're not from Ohio. We migrated out of Georgia to Ohio. Where in Georgia is your grandfather buried? And then your father buried. And then she said, your grandfather is buried in Midway Church Cemetery, Jasper County, Kelly, Georgia. And once I got that information, I said, I'm going to meet him in the graveyard. A young black man from the north who my mother would never let us go down to rural Georgia because she said, you wouldn't know how to act. You'll be acting like you were in Newark and you couldn't last. But so that was my mother said, I'll take you to Atlanta. We'll go to do all the things. Virginia, you can go to the countryside. We got our farms and we got our school and all our stuff there. So every summer we went to Virginia. But she was cautious about Georgia because she knew we would not take a back seat for nobody.
Right.
But at any rate, I rented a car and went down to the graveyard and met him at night in the graveyard. Here I am by myself, going somewhere I had never been, but Spirit led me to that graveyard. And it was dark and I was getting scared. I turned the lights on. I went to the church that they had built and it was open. So I went in and said my little prayers. And then I said, the big thing is I have to go into that graveyard. Now I was scared. So I got myself prepared. I got me a little stick to deal with the snakes. That's a city boy understanding. Got that little stick. Wasn't going to do nothing against no snakes down south. And the problem wasn't the snakes. They later told me the problem was the ticks. You got to worry about the ticks. I ain't know nothing about no damn ticks. But I did get in that cemetery, and there was the tallest tombstone was his, Jesse Jeffries, born and August the 10th, 1868, at the time of the 13th Amendment. And he died 1917. I didn't realize then that he had been murdered. But the thing was, he had the tallest tombstone. It was a Tekken. It had the ankh and the symbols all over it.
Wow.
So I have not been the same since. By myself in rural Georgia, scared but not scared, on mission. But I didn't have the family information. If I had at midnight looked to the sky, I would have seen in that area a light, that the sky was lit up. And who had that light going on? Our family. They had brought chicken farming to that area of Georgia that was so powerful and making money that my Uncle Duval had brought it and introduced it to white people, and the white people made money on the chicken farming, egg-laying chickens. And what they do is they keep the it can't call it a coop. It's a big contraption, 200 feet, and they keep the lights on up to midnight to keep the chickens clucking and laying eggs. They don't know that the sun has gone down. They still think it. And then at midnight, they cut the lights off, and then the chickens kind of cut down. And then at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, they put the lights on again. They got chickens laying eggs all through the night, except for those 4 hours or so. And so when the big truck came to take the load of chickens away from Uncle Duval, this trailer truck was able to make its way down to the chicken complex and walk away with 1,000 eggs.
That's crazy.
This was a black man who brought that to that region, and people were crying over his coffin when he died.
So Sister Sai, Dr. J, I just want you to know that we are in a session with Curtis Blow and his organization. What is it? Brother Curtis United Congress for Humanity, 8 o'clock meeting. So I'm just letting them get a taste of what you're sharing on your show, Sister Sai.
Okay.
Sister Abu Shashat. So yes, Curtis Blow, one of the founders of hip hop, is watching you and Dr. J as you go about your show. So I just wanted them to get a taste. Dr. J is the chair of their education committee. And since he can't be on it, I wanted them to have a taste of what he is sharing with you during your session.
Wow.
Well, thank you for letting me know that. That is awesome. And I would absolutely love to have Curtis Blow on our show. And Charles, I'm sure you can make that happen.
Charles will be using his maneuvering. He'll say he'll make it happen if I can fully participate and also express my Africanness and my transformation, because Charles has had a heavy transformation. So he wants to be able to bring it out and put it out there, which is cool. But I'm the elder. I got the 85 years heading toward 90. So Charles is supposed to give me a break. He gets.
Dr. Jeffries seems to forget that when I first met him, he was my age. He wants me to stay 20-something forever. It's my turn to step into some of the leadership role as well. He knows I respect and love him. But I'm 50. I have a few more years to do what I have to do, just like he has a few more years to do what he has to do. The young cubs need to start speaking out, because there are people on the scene that are misleading our youth, giving them misinformation, giving them propaganda that serves their egos and fills their pockets with money. And it's time that those who have been around the elders, who are, as we see, they're passing left and right, those of us that have been around the elders, that have a connection to that history of struggle, that feel a love for our people and not trying to use our people to get money in our pockets. Right. Those of us in my generation need to start speaking out. So I don't want to take I can never take Dr. Jeffries' shine. There's too much shine on Dr.
That's
J.
Right. That's right.
You
heard that, the world. You heard that.
Dr. Jeffries has been Dr. Jeffries has touched every African intellectual, entertainer, politician that there is in America, on the continent of Africa, in the Caribbean. If you mention a person, it's like, you know how they have that game with the actor Kevin, what his name, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. We have a 6 Degrees of Dr. Jeffries.
Why are you leaving Europe out? I took Europe by storm. Hey,
that was a mental thing. I want to leave Europe out. Where every person, if you could mention a person, you could mention Josephine Baker. Dr. Jeffries has met her.
Miriam Makeba.
Alex Helge. Yes. Miriam Makeba.
Dick Gregory gave us his babies, 11, 8, and 11, to take them
Muhammad
to Africa.
Ali, Jesse Jackson, Curtis Blow.
That's right.
Now, KRS-One.
That's right.
They don't have nothing to do with Dr. Jeffries, but yet he's somehow been connected to the hip hop folks and poor righteous teachers. It's this, Tretch and Naughty by Nature. He's been in contact with all these young people that influence them. So there's nothing that I can do comparably to that. Oh, I know Dr. Jeffrey. That's about it. That's about it. So no, I can't take his shine, but it's time for me to step into some of the leadership roles. So
Dr. Jeffries.
Yes, but hold it. We don't want to get. I know you got to close it. We're doing it.
No,
I'm not
closing. I just wanted to say Charles is part, not ought, because Charles is his own man. Part of the shine that Charles has is because he's been around Dr. Leonard Jeffries.
But that's one thing. But he's been around Dr. Ben. He's been around Dr. Clark. He's been around Professor Scobie. He's been around Professor Small. He's been around our women, my wife and Jerry Price and Shashi McIntyre. Mm-hmm. He's been exposed to the family, and Camille Yarbrough. He had one of the greatest opportunities was to go with me to protect me, actually, because Brother Small said that we can't have Dr. J going here and there without some protection. So we made one of the greatest experiences I've ever had together. He is the only witness to that special experience. To this day, he has not put it on tape. He has not thanked me for it. But I'm going to forgive him, because when I get to the pearly gates, I'm going to say, put up some extra barriers. Certain people are going to be trying to sneak in here, and they need to be questioned, and their hearts need to be weighed against that feather of truth with a serious analysis. Because Charles had actually gone to 12 slave dungeons. Who on the planet has been to 12 slave dungeons? Very few people. But he added that to that. He had gone to the new city of God that somebody inspired by King Akhenaten and T and the family of Tut had built this new city of God. He actually was physically there with me. I could say I was there, and the people said, well, where's your witness? The only damn witness I got is the Creator and the ancestors and Charles. But he ain't written a serious word about it. He writing about the this and the that, and I'm in a badoop and that badoop. And that's it. I'm going to cut it off at that. I don't want to have to go up.
Curtis, you hear my beating?
Look, it was
Curtis, you hear my beating?
Dr. Jeffries, tell me what you need Charles to do. I'll make sure that he gets it done. We'll have a little private session.
And see, the new city of God references this special tradition that we've inherited, African peoples have inherited out of the Nile Valley. And people have tried to use it, that concept, to build a new culture. And they're having trouble because so much of the old culture, the negative culture, the European poison is there.
Right.
But Nkrumah tried to build a new city of God. His rivalry next door on the Ivory Coast. Nkrumah built the new city of God. His rival said that we'll take 10 years and we'll see who will build a city of God first. They both built cities of God. 2 black men of the Afrikan tradition had a wager, and they built it. The cities are there. They've been misused and abused now, but it's something that needs to be looked into.
So
And so I'm Charles, I guess he doesn't want any spiritual forces coming down on him too heavy, so he's hiding under a rock. But see, once you turn these rocks over, there it is. The sunlight is going to be there. Charles knows, for example, that when I left, Dr. Clark had taken us to California to fight these white folks who controlled African studies. And he took his team of young Black men and women to do battle with the white folks out in Los Angeles. And so that battle meant that we had to challenge them and say, we demand a share of African studies as a part of our contribution to the legacy of humanity. And that was just, I was there with the elders and with my peers. Dr. James Turner was there, who built the Cornell Black Studies. And Dr. Ronald Walters was there, who built the Howard Black Studies. Dr. Shelby Lewis, who was working in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Herschel Challoner, who was with me at City College and working in Black. In other words, Dr. Clark took us young potential warriors and great scholars. He exposed us to what the challenge was. And you can't take a back seat. You can't bow. You can't bend. You have to stand up. And we did. And so we transformed that organization. And a couple of years later, we were in Addis Ababa with that organization, 35 of us, and Haile Selassie had invited the whole group of international scholars to come. And there we were with our king, Dr. John Henry Clark, sitting with all majesty. And Haile Selassie gave us special sessions. And it was 200 people there. And he stood in front of the Jubilee throne in the palace and shook everybody's hand. But when it came to Dr. John Henry Clark and Haile Selassie meeting, it was spiritual light coming together. I can still see it and feel it. They didn't have a normal greeting. They had a special relationship. And so that's why we have to begin to understand this. There's larger things than what we think is there, and we need to be a part of it. And there will be attempts to destroy it and not give it its significance. But we have to understand that we are the people of the light. And you have your various forms of it, and we have to tap into it. And I went out to San Jose with Dr. Clark. That was 68, but I was back in San Jose in 69 because those people had heard about me and they invited me to come back.
Dr.
And I came back, and then that's when I got involved in the Olympics with John Carlos and the people who were in the Olympics.
Now, I have a question just to go back a couple of comments, because bringing those two great men together, and you said there was a light, and you still feel it, and see it today. What do we have to do culturally? Can you give us 3 examples of what we need to do to bring us back to that level of culture, that level where we have 2 great men of that stature, so that we can recreate, once again, do it again, right? And I'm saying that to the audience, recreate that so we can have these great men again, and we can have and acknowledge our great women again.
And I would want to move it into that context, but move it away from the personality. In other words, it's a tradition, it's a process. And so that's why when you see it in its fullness, and I use the triangle, economics, politics, and culture, the integration of those processes. And you can, if you have one, you're not going to be as successful as if you have 2, and you can really be successful if you have economics, politics, and culture as the process that you need to be about. I, for example, have it on my lap, and this has never been seen on TV. I have never used it, but it's just sitting here. and it was time for it to be seen. This is the Arkan World of Gold Weights. It was originally published French Univers Arcan des Poids de Pesidor and the gold weight system. And there is the king of Asante greeting another king in his throne room. And these are the deep traditions of our people. Now, this is a 4-volume study of just this one kingdom and its relationship and its deep culture. So that's why I'm saying that we have to get on the good foot and tap into some of this enormous knowledge because we're being bamboozled with just partial knowledge and knowledge that has been messed over. And these folks, the light is there. You have to tap into it and you have to spread it. And to use an example of unfortunate misuse.
Excuse me, Doc.
Yes.
Can you explain to her and to folks what it's just exactly what the Congo weights are in terms of encapsulating the culture and the principles?
Charles did interrupt me correctly. I'm moving too fast. And the Akan gold weight system. Again, I said, what is the importance? Economics is the first principle. Politics is the second principle. You integrate with your economics, but culture is the deep thought. These gold weights represent deep thought. They represent philosophical ideas. They're not just playing with gold. They are coming out of gold to give them the luster. But you're talking about philosophical thoughts. These are dealing with growth with ideas. And just one African culture in Ghana, one part of Ghana, has this brother scholar. He's a giant man, Nyango Mbua. And then on the back, there is one symbol, Sankofa. Go back and fetch it. And there is a gold weight of Sankofa. Go back and fetch your deep thoughts. Go back and get your history. This is real culture that's alive. This is not culture that you play with. This is not culture that you prostitute. This is not culture that you can make money off. These are the deep thoughts of the human family. And the Sankofa bird standing on a pyramid in gold. Can you imagine the Europeans seeing this? Said, "Oh my God, let me get the gold. Let me get the gold." They left the idea. They left the ideal thought there. Go back and fetch it. You ain't going to be what you need to be if you're dealing with some phoniness. Go back and fetch your culture. Go back and fetch the ideas. Go back and fetch the root that your family was given to be and whatnot. And the brother is a giant. He's big, 6'5", Nyango Mbua. And him and I were buddies because I lived in the Ivory Coast for 3 years, and he was their leading anthropologist, and we actually brought him to America. Wow, there's ain't no knowledge like this being taught at no Harvard, no Yale, no Princeton. It ain't taught at London and Cambridge. It's not taught in Paris at the Sorbonne. This came out of Africa. Giant African thought makers and ideal creators passing this knowledge to us. Hey.
You know, I may be the host. I am the host of Tuesday Talk, but I'm a student, and your girl was just listening like everybody else.
And the icon should be A-K-A-N.
Sorry.
Yeah, A-K-A-N. No, that's a little mistake. That don't mean nothing. That's a little mistake. The fact that you could even allow these things to be floating out in the stratosphere and affecting people. And somehow a thought came to me as I'm thinking about the people that I've met. You know, like I grew up thinking I was going to be Jackie Robinson. And then he, of course, opened the doors for Black ball players to be in the big leagues. And one of them came from the Dominican Republic. They developed a whole industry of producing ball players to get into the major leagues. And then they developed one of their people, Sammy Sosa, and he played with one of the Chicago teams, and he broke major league records in terms of greatness in playing baseball. But to the end of his life, he decided that in order for him to be the great baseball star that he was not enough. He actually bleached himself into whiteness. He was wealthy enough to bleach himself from a dark black man in the Dominican Republic to a carbon copy white man. So that's why I say it's a poison that we have to praise him for the greatness that he achieved, but deal with the fact that he could not get rid of, even with the greatness and even with the singularity. He wasn't a Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron came out of the roots of Black America, and Hank Aaron knew what his role was. Hank Aaron stood as a beacon of greatness. No scandals, no nothing, just greatness. And can you imagine if Hank Aaron decided to whiten himself up at the end of his career? That would have hurt all of us. It would have been like a death blow. We'd have to pick ourselves up from the ground. But luckily, we understand this color question, and we got to go deeper than that. It's a cultural question that we are the mothers and fathers of the universe. We take no back seat to that. We have no excuses. Everybody else comes out of the foundation laid by African peoples.
Okay.
That's absolutely, obviously we know that this is correct. The Sammy Sosa example of the deep infection that is all over this planet is an amazing visual example. He's clearly an African man. You can look at him and see. And if you guys don't know who Sammy Sosa is, if you Google him, you'll see a picture of him before and you'll see a picture of him after. And he looks like a clown. He looks ridiculous with his skin that white, because it doesn't look like regular white people's skin. It looks like he bleached it. It's really sad. It's really sad. And it's an example of the colorism, which is really an outward projection of self-hatred. That's what colorism is. So yeah, that and I have here, or I didn't state that. I said Hank Aaron came out of the greatness of Black America, which is what you just had said. So reclaiming our culture is something that is rooted in reading about our history, and so that is what I asked Dr. Jeffries, what are some things that we can do? He gave us a really great example with reading the book that he gave. Dr. Jeffries, I'm going to ask you to tell me the title and the author. I'm going to put it in the chat. Actually, if Lee or Cheryl, if you guys can put it in the chat for me when Dr. Jeffries gives the name of the book, and I'm going to put it up here, because we have to start reading about our ancient history. And I know that it can feel and seem overwhelming. Part of that is because that at some level, consciously or subconsciously, we have all of this history because we've been on the planet for so long. Where do we even start? You know where you start? Just start. This is what I had to say to myself. Just start. And as you continue to read and go wider and deeper, chronologically, you'll know where to place the information, and geographically, you'll know where to piece the information, because it's like putting a puzzle back together. You just start, and then eventually, as things fall into place, you see another piece, you know where to put it. You see another piece, you know where to put it. That's what we must do if we want to be a part of the force that gives ourselves our Black liberation. We must learn about ourselves so that we are not ignorant of who we are.
Wow.
Go ahead, Dr. J. We're ready for you.
Well, certainly. No, I'm glad that you raised this question of us getting the documents we need to have. My wife and I like Dr. Clark and others, Dr. Asa Hilliard, Dr. Jacob Carruthers, our great sisters, Dr. Shaka McIntyre, we have libraries of knowledge. We just don't have a few books here or there. And each of the great scholars represents schools of knowledge. Dr. Clark is not just was not just a great scholar. He represents schools of knowledge, but he stood on the shoulders of others. He had an elder who was light as he could be, but he was from South Carolina and he was into this history, John Jackson. But they had an African history club and they shared the knowledge with each other. And then John Jackson became, he was at retirement age. I was asked to bring him on. Dr. Clark said, we don't want to lose his work. Can you hire him? So I hired him as a visiting professor at City College. But usually a professor stays 1 year. But he was so good and so wonderful that we had him for 1 year. Then we said to the college, we need him for another year. And then after the second year, we said we need him for another year. We had him as a visiting professor for 3 years. He was in his 90s, and we didn't throw him away and say, well, he needs to be in the garbage heap of humanity. No, our family in Chicago, headed by Dr. Jake Carruthers, asked him to be sent out to Chicago. So they kept him on their payroll teaching. Dr. Anderson Thompson and who was one of their great leaders, and Dr. Jacob Carruthers. So he spent another 3 years. His life was extended and expanded by us being conscious, being in these institutions, and then using them so they were exposed to others. And then, of course, with us, we're talking about spreading it across the globe. And so here's a great African, myself.
Dr. Jeffries, you're frozen.
Oh, okay.
Oh, maybe you might move. I don't know how you unfreeze it.
Yes, but at any rate, we're talking about not individuals in a book. We're talking about schools of knowledge and families that work together in communities and transformed institutions like great cities like New York or Philadelphia. Malefi Asante and his group in Philadelphia, Jacob Carruthers and his group in Chicago, Dr. Asa Hilliard and his group in Atlanta, Shelby Lewis and those in New Orleans, Malana Karanga and those on the West Coast, Wade Nobles and the people in San Francisco. That you've got to. These books are entree into this enormous knowledge. And here's a key one that we really have to have. It represents Dr. John Henry Clark. Notes for an African World Revolution. Africans at the Crossroads. And we're at the crossroads. We've been there. This last 100 years has been a crossroads. And their notes for an African Revolution, the unfinished revolution of what? Kwame Nkrumah, the unfinished revolution of who? Marcus Garvey, the unfinished revolution of who? Malcolm X, the unfinished revolution of a brother who only had a day in the sun, Patrice Lumumba, but still he said, I want to lead a free Congo. I don't want to lead a Congo that's dominated by the Belgians. They've been dominating us for centuries. And so this type of work is what we're talking about. You get one book and then it'll introduce you to others. And so all of these great scholars like Eric Williams, the president of Trinidad, the prime minister of Trinidad and Tobago, these were schools of knowledge. And out of Trinidad came a Black man who was an educator, Tony Martin, and he published books. And Tony, for some reason or other, a lot of the Trinidadians have this skill for book producing, and so a lot of the publishing companies that are helping us get these books out over these last 30 or 40 years have been Trinidad, and even in Washington D.C., our brother Nati from Trinidad Tobago, he's one of the biggest distributors of the books. He's married to a beautiful Queen Mother from the Black population in America. So they have maintained their workshop where they produce the works and distribute them to the world. And also they have an outlet, and that outlet is in Baltimore, and it's everyone's place. So these folks, and when you see him, he's tall and he's melanized and he's wearing an African turban. And you might want to say, well, he's from Mali. No, his spirit is powerfully reinforced by knowledge. But he's from Trinidad and Tobago, and his wife is one of our people here in the U.S. They formed a union to produce this knowledge out to our people. So I'm saying schools of knowledge, great individuals, and whole communities are committed. Dr. Clark came from a poor Alabama, Georgia foundation, Pine Union Springs, Georgia, and then Union Springs, Alabama, and across the border is Alabama, Georgia border. Dr. Clark produced, he couldn't go to a library. It was against the law for a youngster to go into the library, but that didn't stop him. He falsified his employers, the white man, and got books out for the white man, supposedly, but they were for him. But he says his great genius comes from his foundation. We said, Dr. Clark, what do you mean? I've had 3 angels in my life, and they are the ones who believed in me and put this great strength in me. And we said, well, who are that? He said, my grandmother, my mother, and my 5th grade school teacher, Eveline Taylor. Now, when you have that as a foundation, you say, well, what about the regular school system? They wasn't teaching this powerful knowledge in the regular school system. I had it too with my mother, but she put it in our homes. That's why we love books. All of us, the Jeffries and any stripe, they want books, and more books and schools of knowledge. And so that's what we've inherited, and that's what we need to continue. I was mentioning this particular.
Dr. Jeffries?
Yes.
So you're frozen again. I don't know what's going on with that. But so
Okay.
I just want to make sure that I'm getting some of these titles down.
Yes.
I have Notes for an African World Revolution by John Henry Clark. Is that
yes?
correct?
That's his school of knowledge. Yes, and that's one of the great books in his school of knowledge.
Now, you also said that there was like a distribution like center, if you will, that's here in the States, right?
Yes, there are several. In other words, in each of the major cities, Black people got together to distribute this knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So in Chicago, you had our sister, and she helped to set up the DeSalle Museum. And my wife was just on the phone earlier trying to restore the work of that she had done. And the same thing with these other cities. You had Black people who took the lead in getting this material out to us. And so we need to look for these schools of knowledge and these centers of distribution. And so it's not just a book. When I say we need a book by W.E.B. Du Bois, and this is his book, The World in Africa, by one of the greatest minds, W.E.B. Du Bois. But he produced a dozen books, and he has a whole history of being on the front edge of fighting for Black people. And so we're saying these books introduce you to their school of knowledge. And you get a young person like Tony Martin coming up from Trinidad, and he has a printing establishment. And go ahead.
Can we get the name of these books and like this particular source? Because this sounds like a really great place for all of us to know and to have access to. Even if we get it later and I post it when this, with this, or just post it on the Shrine and wherever.
Yes.
Excuse me. I know I'm gonna have to ask Dr. J just to move over a little bit so I could try to put a land that connection, because you keep saying that the picture is freezing. So let me see if I have the right wire to plug him in directly instead of using Wi-Fi.
This is the most unusual Tuesday talk I've ever had. We got Charles talking on the side, then we had Charles. We got all the books. We wrapped with Curtis Blow. He was looking at us. This is pretty interesting.
And even Alex Haley is saying, Dr. J, you're lucky you got a pretty sister there that's working with you. I see the little grin on Alex's face. And but here is one of my best pictures. There is one of the greatest men in the history of the world, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop. And then who is next to him in Atlanta, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. In other words, Dr. Jep and I, we are related in all kinds of ways. And this was a great tribute. He is in the House of Greatness on the Morehouse campus, and they had a portrait of him made. So this is the great African from Senegal who linked up with the great Africans from America. It don't get no better than that.
Let me slide in there. Keep talking, Si. I'm gonna try to just do the wire while y'all are talking. I'm sorry. My apologies to you.
No problem, Charles. I got this. I ain't even worried about all of this. But Dr. Jeffries, where you going? We still need him.
No, he moved me out of my seat. That's the way he does it.
I have to. The Wi-Fi thing is where he's sitting.
He's a roughneck. He's just a rough. The world. He's just a roughneck. Get me? I need somebody who understands and appreciates us elders. Look, he's just pushing us around, just like we was just. But anyway.
Dr. Jeffries is definitely, giving us all the fun and the knowledge as well. So, what I'm definitely going to do for everybody who's on is get a book list and the publishing list from Trinidad and all of that, because if just by putting it in the chat, it's kind of hard to kind of grab it at that time. But Dr. Jeffries, what's the name of the publishing company that's in Trinidad that produces a lot of these books?
They're actually now in Buffalo, New York. They were in Brooklyn, and then things got too hot there, and they were smart enough to move the printing establishment to Buffalo, and so they have an outlet in Trinidad, an outlet in Buffalo, and then Charles is also close to another African here in Jersey. He has African World Books and Red Sea Press. He's in Trenton, New Jersey. He's an Ethiopian publisher. So what we'll do is get you a list of the publishers and the individuals, and that'll really allow you to do what you need to do to distribute.
Okay.
And people need to start to build libraries, and that becomes the important thing. Build a library. I have a book in the living room by Malcolm's daughter, Ilyasha. She's the third daughter, and it's a children's book on Malcolm, and so it's just wonderful. She contributed to a. Don't worry.
I apologize. I don't have the right wire. Not that I don't have the right wire. The wire that I have, this computer doesn't have that connection. So we don't have to make do for
We're
now.
still learning. We frozen or not, because both of y'all are frozen now. Now it's both y'all frozen. It's half y'all. We don't see any faces. It's just frozen, and that's fine because we can hear you.
I was trying to get the Malcolm book. It's in by the window. Yes. But look, everything has its difficulties, and ain't nothing easy. The fact that you could even, because we tried to do an earlier program by one of our former students, and he had to do it by himself, and then he said he'll have us participate next week. But the fact that we can connect like this is fantastic.
Yes.
So that you've done relatively well, where the others we had to postpone it to next week. Now this, oh wow, yes, Charles is hey, oh goodness, he got some good sense in him, Charles. Hey.
What you do, Charles? It's still frozen.
Uh-oh.
Well, this is just so everybody here who's following. Charles and I will be on the phone after this is over, and I'll get the list of the books, and I'll get the list of the publishers, and I'm going to post it to the Shrine of Ma'at Facebook page. Okay. So there are some people who are following from African Genesis Institute and the Shrine of Ma'at YouTube page. and comedic legacy today. If you could please just go to the Shrine of Ma'at Facebook page. I will publish it there. Okay. I'll put it there. I'll do it tonight after Charles and I talk. Okay. So it's easier for it to be in one place. It would be difficult for me to do it in those other places because I don't have immediate access to those other places. So I'm gonna put in the chat. You guys know how to get to Facebook. Shrine of Ma'at Facebook page. All you have to do is like it, and then you'll see this the list from this particular episode of Tuesday Talk. Okay. And one of the things that is important that we're doing this season for Tuesday Talk that we didn't necessarily focus on last season, the two things. One is live. And sometimes live is crazy, live is fun. You know, live is live, right? It's like a Broadway play. It's live. We go on live. I like live. The second thing is at the end of, oh, there we go. At the end of a Tuesday Talk, you have tangible like assignments to do so that you can do your part in us reclaiming our African minds. Okay. This list of what to read and where to get it is going to be your homework tonight. Now, Charles worked his magic and we are no longer frozen. So let me just say, I'm going to read this. We see Malcolm Little, and we see a picture of the family with Malcolm X, one of my personal heroes. My mother and my father most certainly gave me Malcolm X as a child. A lot of other people had Martin Luther King, and not to disrespect him, JFK, and pictures of white Jesus on the wall. I had Malcolm X on my daddy's wall. Anyway, I'm giving the mic back to you, Dr. Jeffries. Please explain. Yes. Let us know what's going on in these pictures.
Well, this is a joy for me because Malcolm was such a fantastic spirit and for all of us, but he was inspired by the work of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and then so of course today Minister Farrakhan is carrying on that legacy. But this is a family portrait of the greatest Malcolm, one of the greatest spirits that moved on the earth with us. And there are three of the babies that his wife produced.
Can you
What's
lift
that
it?
now?
Can you lift the picture?
Yes. Let me put this one down. And
that's so beautiful.
Yes, it's in our living room, and there is Muhammad Ali, who called himself the greatest, Malcolm, who did the greatest work in terms of struggle, and then he gave his life. And they are the three of the first of the five. The oldest one is Malcolm has two of the daughters on his knee, and Muhammad Ali has the third daughter, Ilyasha, who is the one who has been very successful in publishing the children's book, Malcolm Little, the boy who grew up to become Malcolm X, was done by that little young lady sitting on Muhammad Ali's leg. And then you have the whole picture includes Betty Shabazz. And she was eliminated from this shot, and it includes her and of course the twins. She had twins, and one of them, Malat, I actually went with her to Trinidad to the French-speaking island, Martinique, where we were celebrating Malcolm, and she made a great presentation about her father, and I was able to speak in French at Martinique TV because the great leader there, Aimé Césaire, and I developed a brotherhood, little brother, big brother relationship. I called him, Aimé Césaire, one of the greatest of our thinkers. I called him Monsieur Cravate. He always wore a tie and jacket, and so I was giving him that respect. But he called me a Diopian, that he knew that I appreciated the work of Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop. And so these are the relationships behind all this great work that has been produced, all these institutions, all of these movements. And so we cannot limit it to just a book or two or an action that took place. We have to see the family rising. And Charles has a favorite image, which we won't be able to see tonight. It's the rise of the Black family. It's actually a statue that has been produced in Senegal, and it's one of the greatest statues in the history of the world. And it's the rise of the Black family with the Black man holding his child up to the Creator, and his leaning on the rock, his foundation, his wife, the mother of the child. So this is the type of work that we really want to let everybody know. They need to see Malcolm not dead, murdered, but see him alive, and they need to see the legacy that he left. And here his third daughter has produced a book about him, and that's this volume here, which I'm so proud that we have. Malcolm Little, the boy who became Malcolm X, and that's by the third daughter, Ilyasha, and she has done many important things. But the great thing that she did for me here is that she signed the book for me and my wife. And so here you have her signature in reference to the Jeffries, Malcolm Little, who became Malcolm X, and she wrote it to Doctors Leonard and Rosalind Jeffries, with love, Ilyasha, 2014. She's also written another book about the journal of Malcolm, and she did that with other outstanding Black scholars like Herb Boyd. And so that journal of Malcolm is coming out. And during that time, I have my journal of moving around Africa. So I'm going to link the journal of Malcolm and his movement to the journal journeys that I had. And I had to have a journal when I went from Lagos to Leopoldville, or from Cairo to Khartoum. And so what we're trying to say is this history is coming alive. And,
Yes.
And I'm glad that you have the opportunity. What happened to your smile? You should look. This is a beautiful image of a young Malcolm. They took him away from us, but his spirit still moves through. And Betty was so wonderful in carrying his legacy. She was very close to us. She was close to Alex Haley, and because of the autobiography of Malcolm X. And so she used me as a little hammer on Alex to try to get some of the revenues from the book to help her with the children. But he really did not sign the right contracts. Alex Haley's story speaks to what we need to do when we are anxious to get something and we don't have the plan. That millions, tens of millions of dollars was made on Alex Haley's work. But Alex Haley died in February of, I forgot the exact date, but Betty Shabazz was there, and we talked, when she came back, we talked about 6 hours about the fact that Alex had 3 wives, and he had left money for them in his will, but he had no money in the bank. He had made and created tens of millions of dollars in a film and a movie, and he died $1 million or $2 million poor. How can that happen? One of the greatest stories in the history of the world put on film and on books and magazines, and they die poor. And that's what we've got to begin to learn, that people use us for super exploitation, not even allowing for crumbs. How can somebody have created the Playboy, written a book called The Playboy Interviews, in which he interviewed Miles Davis, and that's how he got to know Malcolm, because he interviewed him. So he had the Playboy interviews and the revenue that should have come from that. He had Roots, the book, that he produced, and revenue should have come from that. And the film Roots, and revenue should have come from that. So how the hell could you die poor? That's the question that has to be raised. And if I raise it, they're going to say, there he goes again, just anti-white, anti-Jewish. No, that story has to be told because I'm in the middle of it. I was able to get a $500,000 grant to help Alex Haley sustain the story of Roots. $500,000 from the Carnegie Corporation. And there's no mention of Len Jeffries and involvement in Roots. And I got the $500,000 information about how we did it to help Alex do what he did. Hey, but you see a smile on my face, in other words, just to have been a part of all of this history is just fantastic. People say, Dr. J, you know everybody. I said, I don't know everybody, but I've been put in historical space, and I'm glad it occurred. And you even knew John Carlos? Yes. I was with him in the Olympics. You were down there in the Olympics? I said, yes. I had to become Carlos. Well, what do you mean you had to become Carlos? I'm saying when he ran and they won, and those black fellows, him and Tommy Smith, put their fist up, even the Australian guy who was getting the silver medal, he gave them a glove. So, yes, I was down there, but they had kicked Carlos out of the Olympics. And I met him going up an elevator in the Diplomatic Hotel. I was going up to get my room, and he was coming down. He had been asked to leave Mexico. So he had to leave, but my presence represented him. And I stayed for another 10 days, and the people in Mexico thought I was Carlos. I couldn't get on a subway or anything. The people, hundreds of people would try to rush to where I was. I couldn't get on a city bus. The people would stop me and give me hugs and kisses. I wasn't going to be turn that down, but except if the men got too generous. But the sisters were there. But I was there when, in response to Carlos, the Jamaican team, whenever they won, they raised their fist. I was there when the white boy Flosby, who created the Flosby stop, jumping over the high bar backwards. Whenever he got up from the ground after his leap, he raised his fist. I was there when the greatest activity was the 80,000 people yelling and screaming in the great stadium that they had built in Mexico. And I speak French. Je parle très bien le français, presque comme le français. En effet, mes études de doctorat étaient faites en langue française. Well, I don't take a backseat to nobody when it comes to French, but my Spanish is kind of weak because I learned Portuguese instead of Spanish, and because I wanted to deal with Brazil and whatnot. However, people yelling and screaming clarified it when coming into the stadium by himself, nobody near him, was one of the great Ethiopian runners, coming in with no shoes on. And so to be a part of these type of activities and to be able to share them as we put them now in the Jeffries Foundation work that we're trying to get together. So it's been a great story of Black people thriving, coming out of nowhere and standing up and being heard. And so Betty Shabazz, one of our great sisters, she stood like Mrs. Coretta Scott King and like all of the others and making her contribution. And then she was able to take these daughters. And then you see in the distance, my wife, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries, Nana Abibio, she just went back to her computer, and she's doing great work and writing a book or two. So we'll continue to do the work, and as long as the Creator gives us our time to work, but we have lived such a life that other people will pick up the torch and carry it. And so I'm so glad to have laid so much on you, and you've handled it with a smile, etc. Even little Malcolm is saying, "Hey, yes, she's doing her thing." So it's going to be a great legacy that all of us share in terms of the books and the knowledge. And so, if you can, get a book list and tapes, because all of the stuff that we're doing now is digitized, and so you can really make the Shrine of Ma'at a source of great knowledge and spiritual understanding. And
Well,
go
Dr.
ahead.
Jeff, I was just going to say thank you so much for a very informative, very interesting live Tuesday talk. It was live and it was lit.
That's right. That's right.
And thank you so much. My mom, when I told my mom a while ago, I think it was the first time I had you on for Tuesday Talk, she was like,
Uh-huh.
Jeffrey, she was like, I know who that is. So she was kind of geeked about it too. So,
Yes.
guys, everybody has a role in picking up the torch and making things continue, and dive into learning about ourselves, because it's the only way we're going to be able to get our African minds back and get our African culture back. And we know that when we get our African culture back, can nobody on the planet match us, beat us, or defeat us.
And so the last image that I'm holding is in Ghana. The paramount chief he installed us, and many of us, including Professor Small, Marcus Garvey,
Mm.
and others. And then this is when we went to. Oh, this is the new monument for Nkrumah that they his old monument was knocked down, but they built a new memorial for him, and then we took 140 or 50 people to Africa on a pilgrimage, and that's my wife and I crossing the bridge, the moat that goes from the land in Ghana to the so-called slave fort castle, Elmina. And so that's another great photo. And then when you open it up, there is our group standing in a circle in the courtyard of the Elmina Cape Coast Dungeon. And there's the ceremonies that we had in reference to what they call the celebration of the British flag coming down and the Nkrumah Garvey flag going up. And so we usually have a 3-day celebration there. And I'm glad to see it has at the bottom of our screen, it's Dr. J, the Shrine of Ma'at, a shining light, and the concept of Ma'at being so important for our people. So as we cross the moat and go into the dungeons, you'll see that for us it's a more than just an academic exercise. It's a spiritual exercise. And 150 people went with us when we went to enshrine our legacy in the sacred places in Ghana. Okay.
Thank you for that, Dr. Jeffries. And that last presentation on Ghana triggered me to remind you guys that the Shrine of Ma'at is having a trip to Egypt and Ghana August of 2022. So you can either do Egypt or Ghana or both. So you want to go to Shrine of Ma'at. I think it's center for Ma'at.org. We also just have that flyer on our website. I'm sorry, our Facebook page. And you know what? I'll just repost it tonight. I'll find it and post it. It's going to be on the Facebook page tonight. Give me like 30 minutes, guys. And because going to the last place where our ancestors departed were, you know, stolen and shipped like cargo is also another reminder of the fact of that we are the same people, because our exit point was the same for the same reason. Okay. So that was beautiful and wonderful. And he said it was more than just a physical activity, it's a spiritual one as well. And so part of the reason why anything that we do as African is spiritual is because we never disconnected ourselves from spirit, and we always lived in Ma'at. That's not just a concept from the Kemetic spiritual system, as you might probably know since you're following the shrine, that African spirituality and its iteration throughout the continent is basically the same ideologically and etc. So, you know, living in Ma'at is something that we need to do, and that includes learning about ourselves to counterbalance the lies, the deceit, and the lack of knowledge that has been placed before us. I always say death, destruction, and deceit is what is placed upon us.
The 3 Ds.
Death, destruction. You know what? Death, destruction, disease.
Okay. Yes.
So learning about ourselves counterbalances all of that nonsense. All of that is fet. So, yes.
Okay. Wow. Well, it certainly has been a very unusual Tuesday talk.
Fun.
And right, the knowledge can be it can be uplifting, and it can be fun, and it can be used as a weapon to get rid of the negative. Speaking in terms of that, I had a chance to work with South Africa. I spent 2 years in Europe at the World Council of Churches, and I told them, I said, you're doing wonderful things, but you're not doing enough for the struggle in South Africa. So they said, Dr. Jeffries, if you think we're not doing enough, we're going to put you in charge of a task force to deliver to the struggle in South Africa. And so that was great, because I had to get involved in South Africa. And that's when I met the spirit of Steve Biko, a young brother who was the Malcolm X of his time and in his space. And he led the students to rise up and give their lives in the struggle. And so his great work cannot be forgotten. White folks specifically made sure they tortured him and basked his brains out of the brain cage. That was the way they wanted to show complete devastation and disrespect. But his spirit rose, and his great work that he wrote becomes the great song for the youth to sing. And so Steve Biko is alive. And when I wrote my book, edited the book on South Africa, it was dedicated to him. And so we really have to take the negative and turn it into the positive. And as a result of the relationship we had with South Africa, we got to know Nelson Mandela personally, and we got to know Winnie Mandela more than personally. She was often in the U.S., and she helped us with the schools that the Women in Support of the Million Man March in New Jersey put together. And and we had a chance to visit her home in South Africa when we went for one of the major international activities. So we have to stay together, build together, and make a way together.
That's right. So, stay together, build together, and make a way together. Remember, it's the rise of the African family, woman, man, and child. That is what we must do. Okay. So, Dr. Jeffries, I just want to say thank you so much. And Charles, thank you for organizing everything and being on the show. We had a lot of fun. It's a little not chaos, but it was a little bit of a little bit of everything. And I think that's what made it a little break, I guess, a little intermission. So thank you for that. I appreciate all that as well. And I'm sure everybody in the audience who's watching us does as well. So, as we continue to go forward, it's great that we have legends amongst us like Dr. Leonard Jeffries. And it was a pleasure having you on. And just thank you so much for imparting your wisdom and stories and humor. And we're just really grateful. And thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad you were able to. The earlier program we had a little trouble, but this one we were able to, even with the difficulties, get through it. And so anytime you feel that we can contribute and be a part of your activity, don't hesitate to make the contact with Charles, and then we can, continue to shine the light.
Shining the light. Yes, yes. Thank you, Dr. Jeffries.
Okay, and in the African
please,
tradition, we would say Medasi P. Many,
Madasi.
many thanks. That's Akan language in Ghana.
Okay, now don't hang up, Dr. Jeffries, because we're going to talk afterwards. So, yes. Madase Peak or P?
Medasi P.
Medase P.
Yes. Yeah.